All right, let's dive deep. Today, we're going on a tour inside our own bodies, into these tiny, microscopic factories that are working nonstop to power every single thing we do, from blinking to thinking to just existing. We're talking about bioenergetics. I mean, think about that for a second. It sounds like magic, right? How does that bite of an apple, that chemical energy, turn into the electricity that fires our neurons, or the raw power that contracts our muscles? Well, that's exactly the puzzle we're going to piece together today. So here's the fundamental problem life had to solve. Energy. You need a constant, steady supply of it. But your body can't just be like a steam engine, burning fuel like crazy. There's a much smarter, much more elegant game being played. Yeah, a steam engine is all about brute force. It's hot, it's inefficient, it's just rapid combustion. If your cells did that, they would literally cook themselves from the inside out. No, life is way more sophisticated. Our cells are isothermal, meaning they operate at a constant temperature. The whole secret is a series of controlled chemical reactions that capture energy, packaging it up neatly instead of just letting it escape as wasted heat. And of course, all of this has to play by the rules of the universe. The first law of thermodynamics is pretty straightforward. Energy can't just appear out of nowhere. The energy from that apple isn't created when you eat it, it's just transformed. From chemical energy in sugar bonds to, say, the kinetic energy of you walking down the street. Now, the second law, that's where things get really fascinating. It says the universe naturally moves toward chaos, towards disorder. Think about it. Your organized, complex body is a direct defiance of that rule. So life itself is this constant uphill battle against chaos, and the only way to fight it is with a steady, constant input of energy. So how do cells pull this off? Well, they're incredible accountants. They balance their energy budget. You've got reactions that release energy all on their own. We call those exergonic. But then you have reactions that cost energy, like building a new protein. Those are endergonic. The genius of biology is using the energy released from one reaction to pay for another. And what do they use for payment? What's the dollar, the yen, the Bitcoin of the cellular world? It's this incredible little molecule called ATP. It is life's universal, rechargeable battery, and it's the solution to this whole energy problem. So ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, is basically the perfect molecular battery. And its power isn't in the whole molecule itself, but in these super high-energy, really unstable bonds holding its three phosphate groups together. It's like a tightly coiled spring just itching to pop open and release a burst of useful energy. So when a cell needs to do something that costs energy, like contract a muscle, it brings in an ATP molecule. It breaks one of those high-energy phosphate bonds, a hugely exergonic reaction, and uses that burst of energy to pay for the muscle contraction. This process is called energy coupling. It makes the impossible possible, turning a non-spontaneous task into a spontaneous one. It's the ultimate biological transaction. Okay, so we know ATP is the currency, but where does it come from? Where is it made? For that, we have to shrink down and go on a tour inside one of the cell's energy factories. And here it is. Meet the mitochondrion, your own personal power plant. You've got thousands of these in almost every cell. This is the place where molecules derived from the food you eat get converted into massive amounts of that precious ATP. Now, like any good factory, the layout is super important. You've got an outer wall, or membrane, that lets things in and out, and then you have the inner membrane. This is the main factory floor. This is where all the action happens. The space between those two is the intermembrane space, and deep in the center, you have the fluid-filled matrix. Keep these places in mind because they're absolutely crucial to the story. Okay, so embedded in that inner membrane, the factory floor, is our assembly line. It's called the electron transport chain. Think of these big protein complexes as workers. Their only job is to take high-energy electrons from fuel carriers and pass them down the line, kind of like a bucket brigade. And at the very, very end of the line, the now low-energy electrons are handed off to their final destination, an oxygen atom. But here's the twist. The energy released from that bucket brigade isn't making ATP directly. Nope. The assembly line is using that energy to do something way, way cleverer. It's building a dam. See, as those electrons get passed along, the worker proteins use the energy to pump protons from the matrix into that tiny inner membrane space. They just keep packing more and more protons in there, creating this massive electrochemical gradient.
It is exactly like a hydroelectric dam, building up a huge reservoir of water, an incredible store of potential energy.
And this idea was totally revolutionary when Peter Mitchell proposed it back in 1961. Everyone thought there must be some direct chemical link, but he figured it out. It wasn't chemical, it was physical. It was this proton gradient, this dam, that connected the assembly line to making ATP. It was an absolutely brilliant piece of scientific detective work. So now for the grand finale. You've got all this potential energy locked up behind the dam. The only way for those protons to flow back down into the matrix is through this one special exit, an absolutely spectacular molecular machine called ATP Synthase. As the protons rush through, they force a part of it to spin like water rushing through a turbine. And that spinning motion, that mechanical energy, is what physically smashes a phosphate onto ADP to create huge amounts of ATP. It's a literal molecular motor, and it's happening in you right now. Oh, and a quick note on efficiency. Our two main fuel carriers, NADH and FADH2, don't drop off their electrons at the same place. NADH enters at the very beginning of the assembly line, so it powers more proton pumps. FADH2 skips the first pump, so naturally, NADH ends up producing a bit more ATP per molecule. It's that simple. Now, this whole system is incredibly elegant. It's a masterpiece of evolution, but it's also incredibly vulnerable. And when this factory gets sabotaged or just breaks down, the consequences are nothing short of catastrophic. Certain poisons can shut this whole operation down instantly. Let's take cyanide, for example. The reason it's so deadly is that it blocks the final step. It gums up complex IV so it can't hand off its electrons to oxygen. With nowhere to go, the whole assembly line backs up. The proton pumps stop, the dam doesn't get built, ATP production grinds to a halt. And just like that, the lights go out. But it's not always an outside attack. Sometimes the problem comes from within. Genetic defects in mitochondrial DNA can cause devastating diseases. But even crazier is the fact that the mitochondrion holds the cell's own self-destruct button. If one of the key proteins in that assembly line, cytochrome C, leaks out, it triggers a cascade that tells the cell it's time to die. It's a process called apoptosis, or programmed cell death. And that just leaves you with this profound, kind of mind-bending thought. This tiny little power plant inside our cells, it's at the absolute crossroads of life and death. It fights against the chaos of the universe to build us, to power us, to give us life, and yet it also holds the final command for our own orderly destruction. That duality right there is one of the deepest, most incredible